Hi, this is Mr. Ng going over the Chapter 4B test taken on April 5th, 2019. This is version C. Question number 1, determine the period of the function. I have y equals tangent to x. I should always write the letters above it. The only letter I have to write there is a b value. B value is to the left of the x. If your b value is 2, to find the period of tangent, is period equals pi over b, and with the b value of 2, then your answer is pi over 2. Common mistake is to think it's 2 pi over b. Remember, that's incorrect. That's only for sine, cosine, cosecant, and secant, those 4. Question number 2, find the phase shift of the function. Y equals cosine x plus pi over 2. Remember, the equation has to have a minus sign. How do you get a minus sign? You change the plus into minus, minus. So the opposite of negative is a positive. So the reason why we do that is so that you can identify that your c value is actually a negative pi over 2. So with the c value of a negative, that basically means you're going left to pi over 2. So the answer would be choice B. Remember my phrase, add to x, go west or left. Add to x, you're going left. Question number 3 says, if the inverse of sine is 8/5 is equal to a, then, well, in this problem I see the inverse. This inverse right here tells us to switch them. And when I switch them, I get sine of an angle equals 8/5. So choice 2 would be your answer. So just circling and then switching is your best. Question number 4, evaluate arc cosine of negative 1/2. Remember, arc cosine is the same thing as writing the inverse of cosine. Those are the same, arc cosine and the inverse of cosine. So we're going to switch those. And I have cosine of an angle equals negative 1/2. Where is cosine negative? Where it is positive. All students take calculus, so positive all. And cosine, so I'm not there. So in these two quadrants. Cosine is the first order pair because it goes cosine sine. So my counting technique, 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. So here at these locations, this is where cosine is negative 1/2. Those are at 2 pi over 3 and 4 pi over 3. Because this is version C, it was easier, I actually gave you this chart. The restrictions for the inverse of cosine is 0 to pi. So 0 pi over 6 to 6 pi over 6, because I have a common denominator. If I multiply by 2 here, I get 4 pi over 6 and 8 pi over 6. You'll notice that none of these are in the restrictions. Only this one is 4 pi over 6. Remember, 4 pi over 6 is 2 pi over 3, so that would be choice D. And then the can fill in the blanks square so that each row and column contain all the digits 1 to 4. Numbers in cages may repeat as long as they are not in the same row or column. So 4 points if you were correct, and 1 point if you were incorrect. And it should look like that, and the front side is out of 30 points. Turn to the back side. Question number 8, evaluate the expression below. First thing I'm going to do is set an equal to a variable, so secant of alpha. That means everything in here equals alpha. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to do this inside part. So the inverse of sine tells you to switch these. So you get sine of alpha equals negative 3/4. Draw a picture. The inverse of sine, if you think about this, inverse of sine, zoom out here, is, my answers can only be between these two quadrants. But if you look at my triangles are only drawn here in quadrants 3 and 4. So that's why I'm rejecting this quadrant here. Although sine is negative, all students take calculus. Sine is negative in these two quadrants. The inverse must be between these two quadrants. So sine sine is y over r, and then a y value is negative 3. And why is the y value negative? Remember, the expression is negative, but the reason why it's negative is because in quadrant 4, your y values must be negative. Your r value will always be positive, that's 4. And then if you use the Pythagorean Theorem, r squared plus x squared equals y squared, so 4 squared is 16. Negative 3 squared gives you 9. If you subtract 9, you get the square root of 7. X squared equals square root of 7. Take the square root. Remember, take the square root of an equation. You have plus or minus, so x is equal to plus or minus radical 7. But because you're going towards the right, it will be a positive radical 7. The fifth thing you need to do is find secant. Secant is r over x. Secant of theta is there. That's the reference angle. So r over x would be 4 over 7. That's supposed to be positive. And then 4 over 7 would be not simplified. So you rationalize radical 7 over radical 7, multiply across, you get 4 radical 7 over 7, and this would be your correct answer. Remember, normally I grade this problems out of 4 points, but I awarded it 21. So that basically means that each problem is worth, each point I normally give would be 5.25. So if you try the problem and nothing was right, you got 5.25. If you can find the inverse, so to get your 2 points, you had to have this equation right here. Sine of alpha equals negative 3/4. And then to get the third point, you would have to know the restrictions of the domain and where and which quadrant you should be in. If you got a negative instead of a positive here, I take off a point. Wrong quadrant, restricting domain, and a positive and negative. And of course you got all correct, and you got 21 points. Question number 9. Graph the following trig functions over one period. Be sure to include a table of values and label your axes clearly. This problem is out of 24 points. I have a trig function here. Y equals 2 cosine pi x. Your a value is 2 and your b value is pi. Remember, the b value is to the left of the parentheses, although the pi is in the inside. Over here there's no pluses or minuses. That means my a value is 2, the absolute value of that means I'm going to have an amplitude of 2. My b value is pi, therefore your equation is going to be period is equal to 2 pi over b. Your b value is pi, so your pi's cancel out, and your period is going to be 2. C value, there is no phase shift, there is no parentheses over here to the right that we just explained, and d value, there is no plus or minus here or way in front over here. So if I know that I have a period of 2, I take this number, and there's no phase shift, so off the x-axis, so 0 to 2. 0 plus 2 divided by 2 is 1, so basically I'm finding midpoints. 1 plus 2 divided by 2 is 3 halves. 0 plus 1 divided by 2 is 1 half. And so these are my 5x values, or 5x. What essentially we're going to do is we're going to use order of operations, PEMDAS, and in some ways, if your d value is over there, then you're really going just right to left. So I have my x values, and now I'm going to multiply by pi here. So all of these I'm going to multiply by pi. Pi times 0 is 0. Pi times 1 half gives you pi over 2. Pi times 1 is pi. Pi times 3 halves is 3 pi over 2. And pi times 2 is 2 pi. Essentially, you get the golden rule for cosine. What's cosine at those values? Again, if you used your unit circle, I'll just do like 2 of these. I'm not going to do all of them. For example, cosine at pi, here's pi. My order pair is -1, 0, x, y, and r. Cosine is x over r, so -1 over 1 is -1. Cosine at 3 pi, the order pair right here is 0, -1. So cosine is x over r, so 0 divided by 1 is 0. Then over here, the last thing you need to do is just multiply by 2. So multiply this whole row by 2, and these are your values. So I have 0, 1 half, 1, 3 halves, and 2. You should have 5 x values there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I have a maximum of 2 and a minimum of negative 2. So 0, 2, 1 half, 0, 1, negative 2, 3 halves, 0, and 2, 2. And then this is your graph of cosine. Looks like a bucket there. Notice I've labeled my y-axis and my x-axis. I wanted to go over the letters. The amplitude there. Remember, the amplitude is the from the maximum or the minimum to the midline. The midline is essentially your d-value. So if your d-value is equal to 0, then this is your midline, because it basically cuts your graph in half. So there's your amplitude. The period of 2, if you notice from 0 to 2 here, that's your period. So the graph starts and ends by 2. No phase shift. I wanted to show you guys a shorter table of values. It just has your x's and y's. You still have to get these 5 x values, and essentially what you do is you just pick one of these. For example, 1 half. If I take x equals 1 half, what's my output? Here I get half times pi over 2 is pi over 2. Cosine at pi over 2, that would be 0, 1, and 1. So 0 divided by 1 is 0, and then 0 times 2 is 0. And you can do that for all your values, and you actually get your 5 points here. So you don't have to use that type of table. Remember, I graded you on 6 criterion, 1 point for x-intercepts. That's either here or here. The shape, did you know, is cosine, the bucket. Accuracy, there's no phase shifts here. It's not flipped. There's no a value of negative 1. Table of values here, either here or here. Your period on that part. And then did you find the letters A, B, C, and D? This was out of 6. And then if you do proportions, each problem is worth essentially 4 points. So if you got all 6 correct, then you would have gotten 24, and so on and so on. Remember, in this problem, you used possible given 0, and then that side was out of 45. So 45 plus 30, maximum score you could have gotten on this test was a 75. Remember, I allowed you guys to pick your version. So if you got it out of 75, remember I told you that it's out of 100. Remember, if you compare the other versions, you'll recognize the difficulty of this test. Hopefully that was helpful for you to make some corrections. Good luck.